Hello everyone. I'm the storyteller from the channel Whispered Tales and I'm here to help you today. I know you use this video to fall asleep, so before that, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where are you from? At what time are you watching? Now, get comfortable and relax. By the time I saw the mist curling above the trees, should have turned back. I never intended to spend the night in a village called Glomhollow. It wasn't even on my map. I found it mentioned in the brittle pages of a second-hand travelogue from 1891, wedged between a hollowed-out copy of Wuthering Heights and a velvet pouch of tarot cards in a dusty bookshop I swear hadn't been there the week before. I had driven too far that day, farther than planned. The highway faded behind me, and soon the paved roads gave way to gravel and then to dirt, the kind that crunches under your tires like broken teeth. Trees leaned in on both sides of the road as if to whisper secrets to each other above my windshield. My phone had long since lost service, and the GPS blinked helplessly before going dark. I should have turned around. But something pulled me forward, not fear, not exactly. More like curiosity wearing fear's skin. I was looking for silence. As a writer, I needed a place where the noise of the world couldn't reach me. I thought I wanted peace. What I found was quiet of a different kind. The road narrowed until it wasn't a road at all but a path worn into the earth by generations of footsteps. The trees opened at last to reveal the village like a secret kept too long. Stone cottages huddled together, their roofs heavy with moss. Smoke rose from some of the chimneys, though I never saw a soul outside. The sign was hand-carved and barely legible. Glomhollow, EST 1643. No welcome. No population count. Just that. I parked near a well in the village square. It looked older than anything I'd seen, ringed with stones smoothed by time and use. A faded rope dangled over its edge. The air was still. Heavy. Even the birds were silent. I checked my phone again, still no service. It didn't matter. I wasn't ready to leave. An old inn sat crooked at the far end of the square, its windows milky with dust. A sign creaked on rusty chains above the door, the hollow hearth inside, the air was musty but warm. A fire crackled low in a stone hearth, even though I hadn't seen anyone tend it. A silver bell sat on the counter. I rang it once. The sound seemed swallowed by the room before it could echo. After a moment, a woman emerged from the shadows beyond the stairwell. She was slight, pale, her eyes too large for her face. She looked like someone half remembered from a dream. Or a nightmare. "You'll be staying one night?" she asked. "I might stay longer," I said, trying not to sound uncertain. She gave no reply, only turned the registry book toward me. I signed my name. She didn't ask for ID or payment. As I wrote, I noticed something odd. Beneath the fresh pages were dozens of signatures, many dated years ago, some more than a century past. The ink had bled into the paper, but a few names still stood out. One name repeated more than once. Same handwriting. Same signature. Different years. I didn't mention it. She handed me a key without a number and pointed silently up the stairs. My room was cold despite the hearth downstairs, but not uncomfortable. The bed was antique, the kind you might see in a museum. The windows were warped with age, their glass bubbling and distorted, showing the world outside like a painting viewed through water. I lay down, exhausted from the drive, and listened to the wind press against the panes. But there was no wind. Only the sound of breathing. At first I thought it was my own. But it came from the corner of the room. Steady. Shallow. Ragged. I sat up. The sound stopped. The corner was empty. Of course it was. But the breath had felt too real, too present. I laughed at myself, quietly. Just nerves, or maybe the silence playing tricks. I turned on the bedside lamp, its light was dim, flickering. It did little to push away the shadows. I left it on anyway. That night, I dreamed of the well. In the dream, I stood at its edge and peered down. The rope dangled, unmoving. I thought I heard someone calling my name from below, in a voice that sounded like mine but wrong, like a record played backward. I woke up with the name still echoing in my head. Only, I hadn't told anyone here my name. I woke with the sensation of having slept too deeply, like I'd sunk beneath the surface of something I couldn't quite climb back from. My room was gray with early light, the strange glass in the windows diffusing the morning into something colder, dimmer. For a moment I didn't move, listening. The old wooden boards of the inn creaked softly under their own weight, nothing unusual. But then, faint and low, I heard it again. A whisper. Just one. It was not in the room with me. It was behind the wall. I pressed my ear to the cold plaster. Silence. Then a dragging sound, like a chair being pulled across stone. The whisper came again, this time clearer. Don't stay. It was not a voice I recognized. Not male. Not female. Just quiet. And close. I backed away and opened the door quickly, as if light might chase it off. The hallway was empty, and the inn was still. Downstairs, the woman at the counter was exactly where I'd last seen her, as if she hadn't moved since yesterday. She looked up as I descended the stairs but said nothing. I had an odd night, I offered, unsure why I was telling her. Strange dreams. Sounds in the wall. Old buildings do that, she said softly. They keep memories. There was something final in her tone, like a warning disguised as a statement. I nodded, unsure how to respond. Is there a place to get coffee? She pointed silently toward the square. Outside, the village looked as though it had not changed in centuries. The air smelled of damp stone and pine. The same smoke drifted from the same chimneys. Still, I saw no one. No cars. No movement. Just the well in the square, the empty path behind me, and the press of forest beyond. I walked until I found a tiny cafe nestled between two crumbling stone buildings. Its door was ajar. Inside was quiet and empty, but a kettle hissed gently behind the counter, and a pot of coffee sat steaming as though someone had just made it. Hello? I called out. No answer. I poured myself a cup. It was bitter but strong. I took a seat by the window. The glass here was warped too, bending the outside world in odd ways. I noticed then that the shadows didn't match. The trees swayed faintly, but their shadows didn't move. They stood still on the ground like scars. And there, in the reflection of the window, I saw something impossible. Someone sat at the table behind me. I turned, no one was there. The chair, however, had been pulled out. As if someone had just stood. Or was waiting to sit. I left quickly, heart beating faster than I liked. Outside, the mist had thickened. The inn looked farther away than it had moments ago. My car sat parked near the well, quiet and useless without signal. I returned to the inn and asked the woman, "Where is everyone?" She looked up slowly. "You'll see them, when they want you to." A chill slipped down my spine. "Has anyone else come through here lately?" I asked. Her eyes searched my face like she was trying to remember a dream she hadn't meant to forget. "There was a man. A writer, like you. Years ago. Always looking into corners. Always listening. What happened to him?" Her lips parted slightly. "He began to write things that hadn't happened yet. Then he stopped writing altogether." That was all she said. I spent the afternoon walking the outskirts of Glomhollow. The forest pressed close, like a wall of green and black. I followed a narrow trail that led away from the square, past overgrown cottages and abandoned sheds. I thought I saw movement in one of the windows, just a flicker, but when I turned to look, nothing was there. The woods were too quiet. Even the wind felt muffled, like the trees were holding their breath. There was something ancient in the air. Something watching. I couldn't explain it. Back in my room, I tried to write, but the words wouldn't come. My mind kept returning to the voice in the wall, the reflection in the cafe window, the missing villagers. Eventually, I gave up and laid on the bed with my journal open beside me. That was when I heard it again. A whisper. Not from the wall this time, but from under the bed. I froze. It came again, dry and hushed. "You're not alone." I forced myself to look. Slowly. Carefully. Nothing. Just the dusty wood floor and the empty space beneath the bed. But as I stared, I noticed something scrawled on the floorboards in thin, pale chalk. "Don't trust the one who waits." Beneath the writing was a symbol, an unfamiliar shape. A spiral within a circle, surrounded by a triangle. I blinked, and the symbol was gone. Just dust again. Empty. That night, I slept with the lamp on again. But sleep didn't come easily. Around midnight, the whispering returned. Louder now. From the hallway. From behind the door. I rose, feet cold on the wooden floor, and placed my hand on the doorknob. It felt ice cold, vibrating slightly, as if something on the other side was humming with tension. I opened the door slowly. No one there. But down the hallway, at the far end, a figure stood just beyond the reach of the flickering sconce. Motionless. Too still to be living. But too real to be imagined. Its head tilted slightly, as if listening. Then, it moved. Not forward, but back. Slipping into the wall. Not behind it. Into it. Like a reflection disappearing into shadow. I closed the door and did not open it again. In the morning, the woman downstairs had a tray waiting for me, a pot of tea, a biscuit, and a slip of folded paper. She did not say where the note came from. I unfolded it. It read, in trembling handwriting, "You are already part of the story. Stop trying to write it." The message was unsigned. But at the bottom corner, barely visible, was that same symbol, the spiral in the circle, inside the triangle. I spent the morning trying to convince myself I hadn't seen what I saw. The figure in the hallway. The whisper beneath the bed. The note with my thoughts written before I could form them. None of it made sense. And yet it all felt right. Like a memory I hadn't lived yet. The village remained unchanged. The fog hung low, clinging to the cobblestones like cobwebs. The same smoke rose from the same chimneys, but there was still no one in the streets. Only the sound of the wind winding through the hollow, low and constant, like a breath too deep to belong to any one person. Back in the cafe, the chair I'd seen move the day before was back in place. But this time, there was a teacup on the table across from mine. Empty. Still warm. I didn't sit. I just stared. I was no longer sure who this village was meant for, me, or the ones who came before me. Or the ones who had never left. Back at the inn, I began searching. I told myself it was for inspiration, for the story I'd come to write, but the truth was simpler, I needed answers. The inn was larger than it seemed. Corridors forked into narrow passageways that felt older than the rest of the building. Some doors were locked, some were not. Behind one, I found a room filled entirely with mirrors, dusty, old, their glass warped with age. They leaned against the walls, dozens of them. But none reflected me correctly. In every mirror, my reflection lagged. Slightly delayed. Just a breath behind my real movement. And then, in one mirror, I didn't move at all. I blinked, but the reflection didn't. It only watched me, head tilted, face pale and drawn, like a dead version of myself trapped in silver. I backed away and turned the mirror around. But behind the glass, something scraped lightly, fingertips, perhaps. Seeking a way out. Later, I returned to my room. I had barely crossed the threshold when I saw it. A new entry in my journal. One I hadn't written. It was dated tomorrow. Tonight, the face will come to the window. Do not open it. No matter how much it looks like you. I closed the journal with shaking hands. As the sun disappeared behind the trees, the inn grew colder. The lamp by the bedside began to flicker. Shadows lengthened where they shouldn't have. I kept checking the window, unable to stop myself. The mist outside had grown denser, crawling across the glass in tendrils. Every so often, I thought I saw movement, a shape in the fog. Around midnight, I woke from a half-sleep. The room was silent. But something was different. The air. Still. Heavy. Then I heard it, a tapping. Gentle. Deliberate. Tap. 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 At the window. I turned slowly. The curtain fluttered, though there was no wind. I sat up, the sheets tangled around my legs. From the darkness beyond the glass, a face stared in. It was mine. Same eyes. Same mouth. But the expression was wrong, too still. Too hollow. Its skin was colorless. Its eyes reflected nothing. It didn't blink. Didn't breathe. It just watched. Then, it smiled. I stumbled backward, heart hammering. The smile didn't fade. It only widened, beyond the limits of what a human mouth should manage. Tap. 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 I almost reached for the latch. Almost. Then I remembered the journal. The entry I hadn't written. Do not open it. The face watched for what felt like hours. And then, it simply faded, like mist retreating before dawn. I didn't sleep. I waited for the light. When morning came, I ran outside. I needed air. I needed sky. Instead, I found the fog thicker than ever. The village was silent, but not empty. There were shapes now. People, maybe. Or ghosts of them. Moving behind windows. Standing just beyond corners. I saw them only when I wasn't looking directly. When I turned, they were gone. The woman at the inn met me at the door when I returned. You saw it, didn't you? She asked. I didn't reply. They all do. Eventually. That's how the village chooses you. What do you mean, chooses? She looked past me, into the mist. No one comes to Glomhullo by accident. And no one leaves unchanged. I wanted to ask more. But I couldn't. Instead, I asked the only question that still mattered. How long have you been here? She didn't blink. I don't remember. And then she handed me something. An old photograph. Faded. Sepia-toned. A group of people stood in front of the inn. In the corner, near the well, someone who looked like me. Exactly like me. I turned the photo over. In handwritten script, the caption read, Arrival Day, October 13, 1891. My hands went cold. That was the date inside the travelogue that led me here. The one I'd bought in the strange bookshop. The one that shouldn't have existed. I left the inn just after dawn, photographs still clutched in my hand. I didn't remember dressing, didn't remember opening the door. All I knew was that I had to get away from that building, from that face in the window, from the reflection that had stopped being mine. Glomhullo was quiet, quieter than it had ever been. But not empty. The villagers were out now. I saw them in glimpses. A figure at the edge of a roofline, unmoving. A silhouette watching me from the trees. Another in the churchyard, head bowed, as if in mourning or prayer. None of them acknowledged me. and none of them moved. They stood like statues, or memories. That's when I heard it. A bell. One slow toll. Then another. Far off, but heavy, thick with age. It echoed through the village like a warning buried in time. Bong. Bong. I turned toward it instinctively. The sound came from the north end of the village, where the woods thickened and the ground sloped downward. A trail I hadn't noticed before curved between the trees like a beckoning finger. I followed it. Each step forward made the bell louder, but I couldn't tell if I was nearing it or if the sound itself was somehow growing, fuller. More real. It filled my ears and chest, pulsing through my ribs like a second heartbeat. I came upon a clearing, and in its center stood an old stone chapel. It was barely intact, roof half collapsed, vines clutching its spine like desperate fingers. A single bell tower rose from the ruin, though the bell itself was hidden in shadow. Bong. I pushed open the chapel door. Inside, the air was cold, but not empty. Something was here with me. Watching. The pews were broken, and the altar had rotted away to little more than splinters. But in the center of the floor was a circle of candles, unlit, though wax pooled as if they had recently burned for days. At the front, beside what remained of the altar, a rope hung down from the ceiling, swaying slightly. The bell rope. I shouldn't have touched it. I know that now. But something compelled me. The moment my fingers brushed it, the bell above roared to life. But not just sound, sight. Memory. The chapel walls trembled, and the candle circle flickered to life with no flame. Faces began to appear in the shadows, translucent, weeping, whispering. Not speaking words, just sounds. Mourning. Pleading. Warning. One face emerged clearer than the rest, drawn and pale, eyes wide with sorrow. It was the woman from the inn. Only younger. Barely more than a girl. Wearing a dress stained with something dark and old. She didn't speak, but her mouth moved. I tried to read her lips. 3 words, "Don't answer it." I didn't understand. Answer what? Then I heard it. A knock. Not from the chapel door. From inside the bell tower. Knock. 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 Something was inside the bell tower. Not the bell, behind it. The knock came again, more forcefully. I stumbled back, but my feet refused to carry me fast enough. I turned and fled from the chapel, into the trees, the bell still tolling behind me with each pulse of blood in my ears. Back at the inn, the woman waited for me. Only, it wasn't quite her. Her face was the same, but she moved strangely now, like a marionette just slightly out of sync with its strings. Her eyes didn't track me, they looked over my shoulder. Past me. Into something else. "You rang it," she said. Not as a question. "I didn't mean to," I replied. She nodded slowly. "Now it knows you're here." My skin went cold. "What is it?" She didn't answer directly. Just walked behind the counter and lifted something from a drawer. A book. Not just any book, my journal. Only, not as I left it. This one was older. Weathered. The leather binding worn thin. But when I opened it, my handwriting filled every page. Pages I hadn't written. Pages I hadn't lived yet. I flipped forward. Entry after entry, stretching days, weeks, years. I saw words I hadn't yet thought. Descriptions of things I hadn't seen. Regret. Warnings. A map of my descent. At the very end, only one line remained: "There's no such thing as the last page." That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the corner of my room with the journal on my lap and a candle burning beside me. I watched the door. I watched the mirror. I watched the window. Around 3 a.m., the bell rang again. Bong. Only once. But loud enough that it shook the walls of the inn. Then, knock. 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 This time, not from the tower. Not from inside the walls. From the hallway. I stood slowly, the candle flickering wildly now. Shadows danced across the floor. Another knock. The sound of slow footsteps. And then, a whisper. "Ryder," I froze. The voice was not angry. Not threatening. It sounded, almost sad. "Open the door," I looked through the keyhole. A single eye stared back at me. Wide. Glassy. It was my eye. Yesterday the eye vanished the moment I blinked. No footsteps followed. No whisper. Just silence, vast and full, as if the house itself were holding its breath, waiting to see what I would do. I didn't open the door. Eventually, I slumped against it, still holding the journal, still clutching my breath. I must have fallen asleep that way, because I woke in a pool of pale morning light, the candle long since burned to a curled black stem. For a few minutes, everything was still. Too still. And then I noticed something new. My room was different. Not in the way things shift in sleep, not a trick of the light. No, this was something deliberate. The far wall now had a door in it. A door that had not been there the night before. It was wooden, narrow, and painted a deep green that had faded and peeled, like something from a long-abandoned garden shed. No knob, only a rusted keyhole. And on the floor, directly in front of the door, was a key. Simple, iron, cold to the touch. I stared at it for a long time, afraid to touch it again after what had happened with the bell rope. But I picked it up anyway. My hands moved without my permission. The key slid into the lock like it had been waiting for years. The door opened with a long, reluctant creak. Inside, a staircase descended, steep and narrow, swallowed by darkness. Not the kind of darkness that follows night, but the kind that waits, patient and ancient. I lit the last of my candles and stepped through. As soon as my foot crossed the threshold, the door closed behind me. No slam, just a soft, final click. Like a coffin lid settling. The stairs were longer than they should have been. I counted 48 steps before they opened into a narrow hallway. The walls were stone, damp and veined with roots that pulsed faintly, as if carrying blood. There were no windows. No breeze. No smell of earth or mold. Just the silence of something buried deep. I walked forward. Along the wall, someone had drawn symbols in chalk, some familiar, some not. Spirals, triangles, broken circles. And in between them, words scrawled in shaky handwriting. This is not the first time. We are echoes. You have always been here. I passed a broken mirror. My reflection stared back, not matching me, not mimicking. It stood motionless as I walked past. Then it smiled. The hallway ended in another door. This one made of heavy oak, reinforced with iron bands. No lock. Just a brass handle worn smooth. I opened it. Beyond, a room. Simple. Dusty. A desk, a bed, a chair. It was my room. Exactly as it was upstairs. Same scratches on the wood. Same window frame. Except this version looked old, like it had been abandoned for decades. Dust clung thickly to every surface. Cobwebs hung like curtains. And on the desk, another journal. I picked it up. Opened to the first page. It wasn't blank. It read, "You found the room. That means it's already too late." The next few pages were filled with drawings, doors, eyes, the chapel bell. Dates, names, scrawled maps of the village. The name Glomhollow appeared again and again. And then, written larger, across an entire page, "The door will not open again." I turned and tried the handle. Nothing. It wouldn't budge. Panic rose in my throat, and I banged on the wood, shouting, but no sound escaped my mouth. It was like something had pressed a hand to my voice. That's when I heard it again. Behind me, from the corner of the room, movement. Slow. Shuffling. I turned. The reflection had followed me. But not in a mirror now. It stood in the far corner of the room, pale and wrong, twitching like an insect remembering how to move. It wore my face, but its eyes were lifeless holes. It took one step forward, and the light bent around it. I backed away, slamming into the desk, scattering dust and papers. My hand landed on something cold. A bell. Small. Handheld. Rusted silver. I picked it up without thinking and rang it once. The sound was thin but sharp, slicing through the air like a crack in the world. The reflection stopped. Then it screamed, not with a voice, but with silence, a noise that filled the room with pressure, bending the walls inward. It lunged. I rang the bell again. The air tore. And suddenly, I was back in my bed. Gasping. The morning light streamed through the real window. The green door was gone. My hands were still dusted with chalk. The journal still sat on the desk, but it was blank again, except for one new line: "You left the room." But the room did not leave you. The sun rose, but the light felt dull, like it had passed through layers of gauze before reaching me. Outside the window, the mist hadn't lifted. It never truly lifted anymore. I stared at my hands for a long time. They didn't feel like mine. There was dust under the nails, faint lines across my fingers, like veins of old ink. I thought I might be bleeding from somewhere, but the red was faint and wrong. Like paint. Like memory. I opened the journal again. The page that once read, "The room did not leave you," had been rewritten. Now it said, "Before it can take you, it must erase you." I flipped through the pages, but they were all blank again. All but the very last. There, written in perfect handwriting I recognized as my own, was one sentence: "Do you remember your name?" I closed the book. Because I couldn't answer. Not right away. The village was changing. Streets had turned, curved where they'd once gone straight. Buildings appeared where empty lots had been. And others, places I knew I'd walked through, were now missing, as if erased like chalk with a wet sleeve. I walked to the cafe. Or where the cafe had been. Now it was a florist. Closed. Abandoned. The windows fogged from the inside. I looked in anyway. And saw myself. Sitting at a table. Writing. A single candle burned beside me. I was hunched over a journal, identical to mine, my face pale and expressionless. I blinked. And the reflection blinked back. But it didn't stop writing. It simply stared at me, eyes locked to mine, while the hand kept moving, page after page, word after word, as if I were nothing more than the echo of that version. As if it were the real me. I backed away. The reflection smiled. Just barely. Just enough to know it had seen the fear. I made my way back to the chapel. I don't know why. Maybe because I thought the bell might explain something. Or maybe because I had nowhere else to go. But when I reached the clearing, the chapel was gone. Nothing remained. Not even stones. Just tall grass, a ring of mushrooms, and the smell of something old. And in the center of the circle, the bell. Not hanging. Lying on the ground. Silent. I knelt to touch it. But the moment my fingers brushed the rusted edge, I was no longer in the clearing. I stood in a long hallway, lined with doors. Hundreds of them. Some open. Some locked. some splintered and broken as if something had clawed its way through. The hallway pulsed with a strange rhythm, like breathing. I walked forward. On each door, a name. Some familiar. Some not. And then, halfway down, I saw a door with no name. Just a single question etched into the wood in long, jagged script. Who are you? I reached for the handle. It was warm. As if recently used. Inside was a room not unlike mine. But the bed was occupied. A figure lay there. Still. Blanketed. Peaceful. I stepped closer. And saw my own face. Myself, asleep. Breathing. But younger. Not by much, but I looked whole. Untouched. Before Glomhollow. Before the fog. Before the bell. Before the face in the window. I whispered my name, just to remember it. To see if it felt real in my mouth. But when I spoke it, the figure in the bed exhaled slowly and stopped breathing. The chest fell. And did not rise again. The world spun. The hallway cracked like glass underfoot. When I came to, I was standing in the village square. Only it wasn't the square. Not really. Because in the center of it now stood a monument I had never seen before, a pillar of stone, covered in names. So many names. And at the very bottom, freshly etched, was mine. Only. It didn't look right. Like someone had tried to carve it and forgotten halfway through. The letters didn't finish. Like whoever I was, wasn't whole anymore. Or worse, had never existed to begin with. I reached forward to trace it. But the moment I touched the stone, a voice spoke behind me. Familiar. Calm. Cold. You can't leave now, it said. You've been remembered. I turned. It was me again. Not the reflection. Not the dream. But me. A version older, worn. Eyes like dried ink. Mouth moving slowly. I, held the journal in one hand and the silver bell in the other. The name fades first, he said. Then the shape. Then the soul. I tried to speak. To deny it. But the words came out backwards. Garbled. Like breath underwater. The other me stepped forward, bell held high. He rang it once. And I forgot the sound of my own voice. I awoke on the floor of my room. Or what I believed was my room. The walls were the same color. The window faced the same crooked tree. My journal was where I left it. But something in the geometry felt off. Like the corners of the room didn't quite add up anymore. As if the angles were pretending to be what they once were. The mirror was gone. In its place, a shelf, new, dustless, and full of books. Identical in size and color. Unlabeled. I opened one. Blank. The second, blank. But the third. The third held pages written in handwriting I couldn't deny as my own. It described the events of yesterday. Word for word. It described the reflection in the florist's window, the second me in the hallway of doors, even the moment I whispered my name and silenced the version of myself that lay sleeping. The book ended with a phrase that chilled me. He has begun to forget me, too. I returned to the village square. The monument still stood. But now, the stone seemed to breathe. The names pulsed faintly, as if alive, or trying to be. My own name was now fully carved. But it shimmered faintly, like it had just been added again. Or was being erased and rewritten constantly, caught in a loop of remembering and forgetting. I walked away. Not to the inn. Not toward the chapel. I followed a path behind the well, a path I swear had never been there before. It led me to a tall, pale building with no windows and a door made of glass so black I saw only my outline reflected in it. Above the door, a sign carved in perfect, swirling script, "The Library of Things That Never Happened." I opened the door. And I entered, myself. It sounds strange, I know, but the sensation was unmistakable. I stepped into a vast, endless space that looked like the inside of my own head, except mapped out in the impossible architecture of a library without walls. Shelves upon shelves upon shelves. All filled with books identical to the one I'd found on my new room's shelf. Some bound in black leather. Others in wrinkled parchment. Some were glowing faintly, others leaking dust that shimmered and vanished before it touched the ground. Each book was marked not with a title, but with a feeling. I could feel their meanings before I read them. Your First Lie. Where You Almost Died. The Word You Never Said. The Person Who Never Existed. Who You Would Have Become. One volume caught my attention. It vibrated on its shelf, not with noise, but with presence. It was titled, "The Day You Didn't Leave Gloomhollow." I opened it. It described this moment. Right now. Me in the library. Me reading the book. Me looking over my shoulder because I could feel something watching me. I turned. No one. But the moment I turned back, the book's last line had changed, "He turns too late." I felt breath on the back of my neck. And a hand, my hand, grasped my shoulder. It pulled me backward, and I fell not to the floor, but through it. Through shelves and ink and memories that weren't mine. I landed in another room. This one was small, made entirely of mirrors. Floor to ceiling. Infinite me's in every direction. Some copies of me were weeping. Some screaming. Some frozen mid-laugh. Some whispering words I couldn't hear, pressing their palms against the glass. But one was missing. One mirror stood empty. And as I stepped closer, I realized that I was the missing reflection. I didn't cast one anymore. The mirror rippled. A figure stepped out, not a mirror image, but something wearing me like clothing. Not pretending to be me, becoming. Its eyes were hollow now. Not black. Not empty. Just absent. Like the idea of eyes had been removed entirely. It spoke without sound. And I understood it anyway. You wrote your way into this place. You cannot write yourself out. It reached toward me. Touched my chest. And in that moment, I forgot what my voice sounded like again. Not just my name, my voice. It opened another book. I didn't see which one. And read a single line aloud. With my voice. My knees buckled. I woke in the forest, far from Gloomhollow. Or maybe below it. Or before it. The trees were wrong, tall and thin, stretching far too high, like pillars in a cathedral that had forgotten its ceiling. The sky above was colorless. A static fog of memory. I heard the bell again. Not ringing. Singing. A slow, long note that moved between tones as if deciding which one felt the most like grief. And somewhere far off, I could hear writing. Ink on parchment. A pen dragging itself along a page. The voice in my head whispered, "The book ends when you stop being the one turning the pages." Door I wandered through the knot forest for what felt like hours, though the light never changed. There was no sun, just that pale, unwavering gray above, thick as smoke, endless as forgetting. My legs didn't tire, but I knew I'd been walking. My hands were covered in dust again. Ink-streaked fingerprints traced lines along my arms like veins trying to remember their path. I began to think in fragments. Words echoed but did not anchor. Time felt elastic. Or liquid. Or both. Until I came to the edge. A clearing with no trees, no grass, just smooth, dark stone. At its center, a tall mirror. It stood upright without support. Clean. Unbroken. There was no frame. No scratches. No reflection. Not even my shadow. I stepped closer and realized, it wasn't a mirror at all. It was a window. But not to anything behind me. No, it showed a room. Stone-walled. Candlelit. Circular. At its center, a chair. A desk. A journal open, pen resting across the page. My hand was writing in it. But I was not seated. The image pulsed faintly, like it was breathing. Or, watching. I whispered, "Where is that?" And a voice, familiar, mine, spoke from nowhere and everywhere, "It's where you are when you forget you've already arrived." The ground beneath my feet softened. I fell forward, not onto the mirror, but into it. I landed in the room. The one from the vision. The one with no doors. It was colder than I expected. The journal sat open. Written in it, just 3 lines, "The door is a lie." The mirror was the beginning. "You must remember backwards." I turned around. There was no exit. Only mirrors. 7 of them, spaced like sentinels, each showing a different version of me. One was crying. One was pacing. One stood completely still, whispering with lips moving out of sync. One was holding a candle too close to their face, eyes flickering with flame. One was asleep. One was missing its eyes. And the last one, the 7th, stared back with nothing. No emotion. No self. It was watching me the way a page watches a pen. Ready to be rewritten. I approached the mirror with the missing reflection. Not the eyeless one. The empty one. As I reached out to touch the surface, the candlelight in the room dimmed. Shadows stretched. The flame bent toward the mirror like it wanted to pass through. I pressed my palm to the glass. It felt like skin. And I remembered something, a moment from childhood. Standing at a mirror in my old home. Saying my name over and over until the word lost meaning, until it sounded like a stranger's voice echoing through the glass. My mother had walked past the room then and paused. "You shouldn't do that," she'd said. "Why?" "Because the thing in the mirror doesn't always stop when you do." The mirror's surface rippled. And then, I was on the other side. Looking out. Seeing the room through reversed eyes. Except now, the room was full. Every version of me was in the space, walking, talking, pacing, screaming, writing, burning, unraveling. All except the one sitting calmly at the desk. That version, quiet, patient, was writing in the journal. It looked up. Locked eyes with me. And smiled. But not kindly. "This is the end of your part," it said, though its lips didn't move. "You were never meant to be the author. Just the memory." And then it did something horrifying. It ripped a page from the journal. The moment the page tore, I felt something inside me collapse. A memory. A word. A name. Gone. Erased. The mirrors began to crack. Not from the edges, but from the inside. As though something within the reflections had grown tired of being kept behind glass. The versions of me began to blur, faces distorting, features slipping. And I realized, they weren't reflections at all. They were futures. Things I might become. Things I had already been. Things that had been left behind when I kept walking. One screamed. One begged. One laughed like it didn't need lungs. And the one who had smiled was gone. Just vanished. The journal on the desk remained, open to a blank page, ink dripping slowly from a quill suspended in the air. It wrote a single line by itself: "You are not reading this. You are being read." I turned again, slowly, afraid that if I looked too quickly I'd find the truth too fast. And sure enough, the room had changed again. No mirrors now. Just walls, layered in paper, pages torn from books that had never been published, names scratched out, dates rewritten. And on the farthest wall, scrawled over and over, "What was your name again?" I opened my mouth to answer. But nothing came out. Not because I was silent, but because I no longer remembered how to speak. I think I was dreaming. But not in the way we usually mean it. It wasn't sleep. It wasn't rest. It was like being buried inside someone else's thought, someone else's voice, but the voice sounded just like mine. I floated in silence. Not the comforting kind, but a vacuum. A place where sound had once existed, and then changed its mind. And then, slowly, I heard them. Echoes. But broken ones. Fragments of speech, torn apart mid-sentence. "It's still he shouldn't have up, if you forget the ending, the store," each voice was familiar. Mine, maybe. Or versions of me I'd left behind in all those mirrors. They didn't bounce off walls. They came from the floor. Because I wasn't walking on stone anymore. I was walking on words. Thousands, millions, of overlapping words carved into the ground beneath my feet, like the floor had been made by flattening countless pages. Pages from books that had never been finished. I knelt to read one. It said, "He will try to remember what he was before the bell." But the bell remembers him now. The air changed. Not in temperature, but in texture. It grew dense, sticky, like I was moving through something that wasn't meant to be moved through. And ahead, in the distance, I saw it, a massive shape. Like a cathedral swallowed by fog. No walls. Just arches, rising out of the emptiness. And between the arches, something, waiting. I walked toward it, step by step, feeling the echoes tug at my ankles like weeds. Each footstep made no sound, only caused the whispers beneath the floor to squirm and shift. The shape solidified. It was not a building. It was a mouth. A gaping, towering mouth carved into the landscape, shaped like a broken arch, filled with black mist that poured inward, never outward. And written above it, etched in stone, "The place where echoes go to die." I stood at the edge for a long time. I didn't know what I expected. A scream? A voice? A song? But there was nothing. Only the slow pull, like gravity in reverse, like I was already inside, and the rest of me just hadn't caught up. A figure stood beside the mouth. It wore no face. Only a wide, glistening eye in the center of its head, and in its hand, it held a familiar object, my journal. I knew it instantly. Not because of the binding or the ink, but because I felt a piece of myself in its pages. Something I had forgotten but had never let go of. The figure did not speak aloud. But it wrote. In the air. The words appeared before me, ink hanging in the fog, "Are you ready to end?" I wanted to answer. I didn't know how. So I nodded. And the eye blinked, once. The world collapsed inward. Not like falling. Not like dying. But like a story reaching the last paragraph, where all the threads tighten, and the space between the lines becomes more important than the lines themselves. I wasn't in the forest anymore. I wasn't in the mirror room, or the hallway of names, or the chapel, or even Gloamhollow. I was in the echo. Floating in it. I heard my voice, from all across time. There was a bell. There was a journal. There was a room I should never have entered. There was a name I no longer remember. There was me. There is, someone else now. In that darkness, a shape began to form, a door. Wooden. Old. Covered in carvings that pulsed faintly, breathing symbols, alive with memory. But it had no knob. No lock. And no way to open it. I stepped closer. And it opened on its own. Behind it, my room. But empty. Not abandoned, waiting. The bed made. The window shut. The candle lit. And on the desk, the journal, open to a blank page, with the pen resting perfectly across the seam. I stepped inside. The moment I did, the air changed again, gentle now. Familiar. I sat. Picked up the pen. And before I could stop myself, I began to write. There was a village called Glomhollow. The pen trembled in my hand. The ink spilled like blood across the page. Each word carved itself deep into the paper, as if the story wasn't just being written, but etched into the very fabric of something beyond. I wrote the first line again. There was a village called Glomhollow. The room around me shifted. The candle flame flickered and stretched like a living thing, casting shadows that moved independently, dancing on walls that weren't there a moment before. Then, I heard it. Not a voice. Not quite. More like the whisper of paper turning itself. The journal responded. Words appeared on the blank page. Slowly. Deliberately. And there was a bell that called. I didn't want to believe it. But I had never seen the journal write itself before. My hand froze. The room grew colder. And the pen hovered, moving now without me. It wrote, "You have forgotten your name, but I remember." The shadows pulled closer, wrapping around me like smoke. They weren't trying to suffocate. They were trying to tell me something. To remind me of something. I looked down at the page. New lines appeared. Remember who you were before the silence. Remember the one who first rang the bell. Remember the promise you made before you came here. The memory hit me like a wave crashing against rock. I was never just a visitor. Never just a victim of this place. I was part of it. And it was part of me. I had rung the bell once. Long ago. To call something. To summon. But what? The question burned in my chest like a slow fire. I wrote, "What did I call?" The journal answered. "Not what you called, but who." The pen paused. And then wrote one last line, "The bell called to the forgotten." Suddenly, the room exploded with sound. The bell. Ringing. Not outside, but inside me. Each chime pulled the fog from my mind, each toll reshaped my broken thoughts. And then, a name. A name that had been lost to the silence. A name I whispered aloud. My name. The journal slammed shut. The candle went out. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt whole. The door appeared again. But this time, it wasn't just waiting. It was open. I stepped through. And the world exhaled.